stream. I'm Cory as always, and we have a special guest on the stream today. I'm very excited to have Hudson here with me. This is Hudson Glover, who's a local synth nerd, music legend. Been around making music in the community for a long time, and I'm very happy to not be the only one on camera and not being the one making all the noises today. So as a stream, often we're doing kind of music production stuff or 3D stuff, and I invited Hudson on to just talk about his musical life. What do you want to say about it, about yourself and your musical life?
So again, my name is Hudson Glover. You could find my music on all the normal platforms. Been in Eureka for over 10 years now and absolutely love the community. I hadn't gone to a DIY show until I moved up here after high school, really.
Cool.
I've been to punk shows and stuff growing up, but hadn't really seen noise or experimental music performed really until I moved up here. And it really opened up my eyes to different setups or what it looks like to play live. And I started making music 100% in the computer in middle school on a little MacBook or eMac or whatever.
Yeah, like FL Studio.
I was using GarageBand, and I right around, I would say, sophomore year of high school, I graduated to Logic, and it's just like a slightly elevated version of GarageBand. There's like not very much of it. You could actually change the layout of Logic to just be GarageBand if you want.
Yeah, the simple.
And I did that for the first 2 years, but I would just be like, yeah, I'm using Logic now. And I really just should have kept using GarageBand. It was much simpler and better days. But
regrets.
Yeah.
About going high tech.
But I mean, like, this is not to segue into DAWs or anything, but it is really the beginning of where I started making music, like not really even playing instruments, but just laying down notes on a piano grid. And like that's the first time I ever could see a beat instead of like think about the beat being pressed on pads, being like, oh, I hear like a drum and bass beat, and instead of like being able to physically play that beat, just knew what that looked like on a grid.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people with Ableton and DAWs, we're so visual and pattern based, and we just drop in the notes because we see them and we know it, and that's with chord shapes and everything. So it wasn't until I went into college at HSU that I really learned how to play keyboard. Cool. And I wouldn't really say that I'm like a very like great keyboard player. I have a very unconventional style. I like really pride myself on chord progressions and like creating harmony that's unexpected.
I hear that
with like roots to I don't even really know where. I like love a lot of 90s experimental house music, and a lot of that's just modulating around like major 7 chords and just like bouncing around, not like kind of defying what harmony looks like.
Totally.
And I'm really inspired by that kind of like renegade harmony approach where it could sound really cool and complex, but it doesn't have to be saturated and music theory.
Totally, yeah, you can arrive at a complex place from a simple method.
And I think a lot of that is like really taking it down to like the most basic thing is building and releasing tension. And if you could resolve something, it just is so dang satisfying. And trying to think of an example, but like in a way, like that was kind of everywhere. But even like a diminished chord, so. And then it goes down, and like the resolution from the diminished chord to like whatever, like I think that was a fourth from that, is like really satisfying.
Totally, yeah.
And you could bring like a lot of organization to chaos that way, I think. Yeah. But I guess to start off with this, I'm just going to go into some basic songwriting with this setup, and I would apply to really anything. If you're using a computer, if you also like looping, you could really make any setup similar to this. So I have a drum machine right here. I'm using a sampler, and it's just loaded with like your classic. I think this is like a 909 kick and an 808 snare, some 808 hi-hats. Pretty classic. You can see on a grid kind of what's happening. I'll take out the kicks. Those are on pad 1. You can just put floor on the floor beat just to make it really simple. Take out the little toms and just only have the cymbals on the 16th notes.
I love how hands-on these things are. You know, like people have watched me on the stream just like clicking around like energies on a grid, and like there's something really different. Like, and you know, like it's the same grid, but it feels different when you touch it.
Oh, 100%.
Super cool.
And this is what I use live. Like I was saying before when I was setting up, I don't really record ever with this. I'm usually in the computer when I'm recording or using an MPC that's a little bit more involved and has a little bit more menu diving. But for playing live and improvising and for showing what's happening in real time, there's nothing better. That doesn't mean you can't record with it. Right. It's just a chore to set up MIDI from my computer and then not having all the drums on separate channels.
Right, yeah, because then you're like stuck.
It's just a mixing issue.
Right, yeah.
But if I just have a really funny idea and just want to get it out quick and it's lo-fi and it just doesn't really matter, then just send the drums out mono. And I definitely have done that before. It's also cool to have a delay on the full output, and it's like pretty sick.
We have a TR8 in the other room, and
it's
so
like
crucial. Like,
and it's like
really bummed out when things don't have a built-in delay.
The kick, the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, everything are going through the delay, but it sounds really good.
Totally, it's a
I think that's on the 2 and the 4 now, and it just sounds great. You could BPM sync it, and it's really performative.
That's rad.
But this is the drum machine. I adore this. I've used it for at least 10 years. It's never gonna leave, and it'll always be in every live set I ever play.
The immediate ready to go sampler.
I like the MPC 2000 XL was my first drum machine that I just fell in love with. And I got this kind of around the same time because this is a step sequencer and the MPC is more of like a beat making pad machine.
Right, yeah, you gotta like hold the sequence in your mind at least.
And it's great, especially when you build a bunch of patterns before the performance. Like live looping it is a little bit less like musical sounding because you could actually hear the off time beat and then get quantized. With this, I could like throw in, I can do the MPC style sequencing when I hit record.
Like
and
play
then,
like off beat notes and stuff?
And then like kind of like be offbeat and then it'll quantize after. But generally I just use it as a step sequence.
Yeah.
Automatically that's already kind of cool. And you could just throw in, that's another technique, like we haven't even started getting into songwriting, but I like to apply a lot of randomness.
I'm big on that as well.
There's certain things like, especially with a kick, not as much with a kick drum, like at least you got to emphasize the one. But when it comes to like a snare, or if you have a clap or something that you could be on the 2 and 4, you could just kind of throw them in random and it sounds cool. As long as you have other things really holding the groove.
Totally. Yeah, drum patterns are so interesting like that. Like there's like things can go really anywhere. And like, especially with 4 on the floor stuff where it's like you're not like stuck in the structure of a bar.
Yeah.
Where like it can really be like each beat can feel like its own thing sometimes, and it's like doesn't really matter like where the back beat is sometimes even, you know.
But yeah.
You just pulse away.
And I mean sometimes it's nice when you don't have an emphasis on any one point because then it keeps it interesting in cycling in a way. And if you create a chord progression that's cycling too, or even in a different time signature, it's just constantly interesting.
Totally.
So this is the drum machine. Then we have this MIDI synced to a MIDI loop pedal. It's not MIDI loop, but it's MIDI syncable. And it has just one audio channel going through from this synth. So I could play, I'm just gonna play a chord and loop it. And then it'll sync perfectly to the beat. So
I set up a bunch of my gear the other day with the loop pedal, but it doesn't have MIDI in, and I was like,
It changes the whole game, and this has actually 4 channels if you want to avoid the effects. I usually just do 3 and then have effect stacking and stuff like that. But 3 is more than you'd need. It's just like a bass line, a chord progression, and a melody. And that's what I use each channel for. I could do almost an entire hour on how to use this thing. It's like another thing I would never leave from the setup. Like if there's any core items for any live setup that I do, it's gonna be this drum machine and this Boomerang 3-phrase sampler. They're like my favorite pair. And then whatever synth or keyboard I use, it doesn't matter. A lot of the times I'll just bring a little Casio. The only issue with that is a lot of the smaller, cheaper keyboards don't have as great of bass sounds.
Right.
So
I always like fat finger those keys too. Like,
yeah, they're really small little things. And I did bring like a little toy keyboard, but I don't know. I just wanted to keep it simple and made an executive decision. So the drum machine, the looper, the synth, that's it. And this has really good bass sounds. So I'll turn off the drum machine. Like it has like, it's like a pretty classic 90s house. Yeah. Like really nice and deep. I don't know, it doesn't really come through on the speakers too much, but it is like it's like a really nice hollow sound. And it cuts the mix while still like not being too much in your face. It has a soft high end, but it's really hollow and big at the same time.
Yeah, like a scooped thing going on.
Yeah, it's just a square wave with really slow or really short attack, or really fast attack and really slow or short also decay. Sorry.
So like it starts and ends like
yeah.
immediately.
So what I was talking about is an envelope, if you don't know, and if I increase the attack, it turns it more into like almost what I think of like in dubstep or something. It has that like wompy kind of sound.
Totally.
And you could make that into a pad too. So if I could turn this bass sound and then increase the attack and then make a nice pad sound out of that, or increase the release a little bit.
That thing really does sound so good.
And you could instantly turn a bass sound or really a lead sound into a nice pad sound that you could use for chords.
Does this thing do? Is it? I noticed you didn't like. I didn't see you flip like a mono switch or anything. Is it just poly all the time?
There's ways to mod it to where you could have true mono. There's a sequencer too in here, which I can't really sync to MIDI. Right. I think I might actually be able to. I just never used the sequencer because it's just not as immediate, and it's a step sequencer, so I don't know. Just a little bit like I don't know. It's not the most intuitive.
I don't enjoy step sequencing things without like the actual.
I like step sequencing drums, but I don't like step sequencing melodic things.
Absolutely not. Yeah, it doesn't make as much sense to me either.
But there probably is a way to make it function as a true mono synth. There isn't a unison mode, which a lot of vintage synths had, where this is a 6-voice polysynth. So on a lot of vintage polysynths, you used to be able to play every oscillator at once, and it would create this giant mono sound. This can't do it. The JX8P can, which is a model kind of similar. But I like this because it sounds a lot more like a Juno 60 or
it's really
Juno 106. It's 2 oscillators, and it's a little bit more metallic in the high end, which I kind of like. It stands out in a mix more.
Yeah, totally.
And it doesn't sound as like cheesy 80s. It sounds like, I don't know, there's like a techno feel to it. Like or even like I get a Boards of Canada kind of like mid 90s.
It's a very 90s sounding to my ear as well. Like that, like late.
Where it's like kind of hard for me to escape the dream pop realm with the 106 or the 60. And I've never owned either of them. I've played them tons and used lots of VSTs of them, and no hate to them. They're like a quintessential part of music.
For those of you who don't know, these are the Juno 106 and the Juno 60. These are like 2 of the most famous like polysynths. Or also most popular polysynths of the 80s. So you can find them.
And now it's like Roland makes boutique versions of them, and they are amazing. They're core. I mean, they're very Instagrammable. They look beautiful.
Those cute little things.
Yeah.
There's one for sale on Craigslist here right now.
Nice.
There is now the full size. They just released it's called the Juno X, which is like
that looks pretty cool.
Runs the models of the old synths of the 106 and the 60, and it has built-in speakers, which I kind of like, as strangely really like that. Because, you know, like I love this like immediacy. You know, the cool thing about instrument is that it's immediate, and if I have to go find a cable and plug it into a speaker, sometimes that kills my vibe.
I love built-in speakers.
I
like miking built-in speakers because they have a really fun sound to them all on their own, and you could cover them and do physical filtering while you're miking them. So it's like when you put an iPhone or something in your mouth and you vocalize just whatever song you're playing. It's really fun to put your hand over the speaker of those terrible speakers.
Oh man, that is an awesome pro tip. Yeah, I love this.
But back to this particular synth. I don't want to spend too much time talking. I could talk again the whole thing. I'm
sure we could keep.
I love synths. They're my lifeblood, especially vintage ones and their history. This is a great alternative to really any like Juno, Prophet, anything, because it's still really affordable, really stable, and Roland just makes really quality products, especially in the 80s. This is like 1/4 of the price of a Juno 106, and it could do 80% more. So it's just really cool. The programmer itself is what is more expensive than the synth because it's pretty rare.
Right.
But I picked this up locally very, very cheap.
Sweet.
From a really cool local musician who knew it would be used a lot. So
awesome. It's
always fun like throwing things back into the karmic cycle.
Yep, I sent a Moog along. I had a Slim Fatty for a while, but
I love those. That was my very first synth, actually.
I saw it in your studio pick. It's now the dudes from White Man have it.
Oh, great. I'm sure it's being used.
Yeah, I think it was part of Anthony's touring rig. That's what he said he was going to do with it.
It's so great. Yeah. Well, let's get started on at least a first, like what I would think of if I'm playing live or recording a song and like thinking about chord progressions or something. I would probably start with a drum beat, or I would either just be doodling around on my keyboard and you could just vamp on that. That's just a major 7 to a minor 7. And you could make it almost an entire song just off of that. So I'll turn up. Let's go back to this first drum beat that I have. And this is a TR-707 for anybody. And I filtered off the high end so you don't really get the click as much. I kind of wanted it to sound more of like a drum kit, like a real drum kit.
And those like the 5, 6, and 7, they're like really clicky.
I love those though. Like those are probably the TR-505.
I saw that in your picture.
Like one of my favorite drum machines ever because it like fits in this unique space where it almost sounds like it sounds like real drums, and it works for 80s like synth pop. But you could push it really hard through a mixer and then make it danceable too. So the TR-707 is just like flat out just acid, in my opinion, or just really grungy house music.
Yeah.
The 505 exists in this weird place where you can make like really cheesy 80s synth pop or drive it and then make kind of like bizarre like house music with it too.
Interesting. I never tried to do that.
Like it's more versatile to me than a 707, but I love both of those drum machines a lot, and I use their sounds probably more than I would think a 909 because they're not used as much, so they're not as tired to me.
Yeah, I feel like I don't get sick of a 909 kick, but like
I use the 909.
I get sick of the 909 everything else pretty much.
Yeah, definitely.
Love the 606 hi-hats.
606 hi-hats and the snare, or like they're so snappy.
Yeah.
But back to this thing. So we have a kick going, 4 on the floor kick. If you could kind of see on the screen, just on the 1, 5, 9, and 13 beats, and I'll get some sort of hi-hat thing going in. Nothing amazing. Maybe I'll put a little delay and give it a little bit of a shuffle, which is kind of nice. So that's giving me a little bit of like rhythmic inspiration. And I was doing just a major 7 off of D and then a major 9. And now that I have a rhythm, I could kind of get some inspiration. Well, actually, I might play around with some presets that I have already recorded. So I have my first 4 slots here, electric pianos that I've synthesized. I think I'll probably use one. I probably use it too much. It's really, really pretty. It's just a great. I think you
I've
could
heard
use
this.
this in every song.
I'm pretty sure I've heard you play this sound before.
It just brings a smile to my face. I don't know like how else to describe that sound. So
is that D major to D minor?
Yeah, that's all it is really.
Common tone like chord, yeah.
And I could bring a 6 in there, D minor 7, add 6.
Yeah.
And part of the beauty with loop pedals is like when I record it, it's not going to be perfect. And I think that a lot of music could really benefit from things being slightly off.
Yes.
I don't know, there's a shuffle to imperfection that's really important, I think. Not so much in a kick drum, but in some of the layering things. In the chord progression, I really like a bass to be tight, but chords and even the melody sometimes could have a looseness to it. Absolutely. So when I play this, I physically, there's no way I could ever play it perfectly. So I just have to accept that it will be imperfect. And anytime I would have done that loop, it might have came out slightly different. So there's this kind of fleeting moment that you could capture with loop pedals that are really cool. Let's just say if you could remember what I'm going to do it again, and it's going to be way different, I think. And that has a little bit different feel than the last one, just slightly different melodically. So every time you do it, you're capturing this really cool moment.
Like shades of color, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's the same idea, but just like that little moment that you caught in time. It's a photograph of something you just played. It's really special. So now I'm gonna go to a bass sound, and this is the bass sound that I was doing before. That sort of like hollow house square wave that's filtered down a little bit. I'll filter it up just because I can't hear it. You could hear it a little bit better. I probably wouldn't mix it with that high end, but just so we could hear it a little bit better. And you could just do something really simple like that. And I'm ending on F right here because that is the note that if you're going up, it could be it's the major. That's the note that's changing it from a major to a minor chord. So I could either have it be D to F, and then I could go up to F sharp, and that'll make the chord progression feel longer than it is, and then accentuate the chromaticism of the chord progression.
Yeah.
So then it feels like there's more happening to the chords, because I'm only vamping on two things, but if you change the bass notes to accentuate the chromaticness of the chords, then it brings out more. So I'll record that. And I could even go down to, I don't know, there's infinite possibilities. So again, you're capturing that fleeting moment. So I'll start this loop. I think I tapped it a little bit too soon. Now I'll take out the chords. You could just hear the bass. Really simple when you just hear it by itself, but it's still kind of driving. I'll put a snare in.
And
I love like the flank and delay too.
Oh man, it kills me. I love that stuff. So I think it's really neat how so like what's going on in this chord progression is like these two chords are actually in two different keys. And that's like what makes it so chromatic. And so like when you like that motion from that F to F sharp, it's like this like kind of like
it's wonky.
Yeah, and this really like catches your ear, but that's like that kind of like renegade harmony feeling of the like
exactly.
You know, like the chords aren't necessarily in the same key, but you make them.
And a lot of like older electronic music, you hear that constantly. A lot of chromatic movement, and that's like, I live for chromatic melody. That's like everything to me. So when I bring in the chord progression, the bass line makes more sense. I have to line it back up.
That's fun.
I think the snare is actually on a different point.
Yeah.
So the snare is actually off, which is kind of interesting. We talked about like it's not actually a polyrhythm; it's just coming in on the wrong beat, and I probably will fix that. So I'm gonna go back to the snare. So it'll make more sense if I'm gonna take off all the snares. So I shifted the entire beat when I was looping it without even thinking about it because there wasn't any central 2 and 4 to really enforce where the measure started. But it's kind of interesting. It changed the way the kick is.
Yeah. It's the illustration of what we were talking about earlier about like if you're just focusing on the pulse, it doesn't matter where the backbeat is.
Oh, it really doesn't at all. So this is just something that you could kind of just have in the background. It's not really obtrusive in any way. I wouldn't even really say it would make people dance very much, but I would say it's pleasant while still being interesting.
Yeah.
And then I could bring in a melody of sorts. Let's see. Maybe I'll have a more ambient kind of pad melody because this strikes me as a softer kind of song. And you could have space. I think that sometimes when melodies are too busy, you're losing what's happening in the chords, in the harmony that's happening. And I think you should accentuate the weirder notes while still giving the pleasant notes space at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start a fifth higher than the beginning chord. And I'm just gonna kind of improvise a while and see if there's anything that really sticks out to me. Maybe turn it up slightly. And I'm playing around with the chromatic notes. They aren't really sticking out to me as being that, I don't know, maybe this particular melody will be better if I'm sticking to all the consonant notes because there's already some dissonance happening in the chords in the bass. So when I'm writing songs, I really always try to bring some dissonance somewhere, and not everything has to be dissonant and weird. You have to make it palatable somewhere to make it listenable. Especially when you're playing live. If I'm at a coffee shop or something, you don't need to be like pushing boundaries necessarily. Right. But it has to be interesting just enough for someone to want to stick around and at least hear the end of the song.
Yeah, or like you want to hook in your tune somewhere, just something that's like catch.
I'm constantly toiled between those two worlds of making something interesting and cool and to a degree like challenging norms while being palatable and having a pop sensibility. And like those two worlds are constantly colliding.
Yes.
But it's really fun to try and find kind of a happy medium.
Yeah.
So I'll play again with some melody ideas. Maybe I'll make it, before I did something that was longer and more spaced out. Now I could do something rhythmic, which might work because everything else is already kind of spaced out. So this is a rhythmic melody idea. And maybe I could do both even, and I could layer both of them.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And that brings kind of some movement to it. It almost makes it a little dancier in a way.
All that syncopation, like
yeah,
makes me want to shake my butt.
And then I could layer on top of that and maybe bring out some more harmony. And then I'm going to stack it. gonna bring that back, and then I'm gonna take out the chords. And when I'm playing live, if I was to have started that first chord progression and had that bass, I could delete those previous things entirely and just start an entirely new song
Based on this part.
with this part.
That's so cool. Man, okay, I'm seeing why you love this looper so much.
Yeah. So I don't really think linearly with looping or live. Like, I would say this right now is almost more of a workshop on live performance.
Here we are.
Because like songwriting, and sometimes when I'm songwriting, I'll just jam for an hour and just kind of trying to, I don't know, transition between different ideas.
Right.
I'll have an hour recording and then kind of skim through and be like, oh, that was a really cool part. Most of my sets are improvised.
Right.
And honestly, I think that maybe 20 to 40% of the set is good at best. And the rest of it, you're finding points, but like when you don't have those lows, then the highs aren't as sweet. So I think that when people are actively sitting with you through those challenging transitions, it makes those moments where you actually finally groove and like they see you grooving to what you're making and happy with what you're making, then it is a very performative thing that you're actively seeing creativity.
Totally.
Yeah,
so, and it's clear to everyone what's happening in
yeah,
that situation too, where it's not like, you know, like oh, they just like play this song just sucks. It's like, oh, like this, they're in an exploratory moment, and like where's it gonna go? You know, like, and like what if you can convince people to come along with you on the journey?
Yeah,
it's pretty rewarding when they're there with you.
I had a performance a couple months ago where I used this synth, and it was the first time I ever played this one out live. I actually have two JX3Ps. So I just really love these, especially this. But this is the first time I ever took this specific one.
I know where there's a third one, by the way. If you ever need, if you need.
I might.
You need to stack them up.
I would stack them all, but this cable right here wasn't working. So the first 20 minutes of the show, I was just fiddling with this, and it was such a revelatory moment when it finally worked, and I was able to use this keyboard because I had another keyboard under it, and I was just only using that one.
And just like one hand on the keys,
and I was
one
just
hand,
constantly like messing with this cable for 20 minutes because it was such an integral part to the setup.
Sounds like a nightmare.
But when it finally clicked, it was almost performative, and everyone was like very happy. Like
it works.
Yeah. But I was probably like very obviously frustrated for 15 minutes, and it's impossible to hide that. A lot of times that happens in live performances. You could be DJing in a laptop and like it just overheats or it crashes. Or, like there's so many things that could go wrong.
Totally.
Electronics are not in any way reliable.
Right.
Especially when you have, this is a very simple setup, but still one of these things could easily fail. A lot of the times the MIDI clock in this will just go bananas and it'll
just like spit some weird values out.
Yeah, and then my looper will slowly go out and I have to unplug the MIDI cable. But I don't mind that much. I think that it
That's
brings,
not like a show stopping.
It brings humanness into it.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times audience, when they're listening to electronic music, just assume that it's all pre-programmed and really easy to do. And I don't think that that's the case for really anything unless it's just you have a full thing recorded.
If you're literally playing
But DJing is really challenging, even when you're beat matching to read the audience and to keep the party happening is a very, it's an important skill to have, and it's not easy to do. Same with this, it's challenging juggling everything. So when people could actively hear that it's getting messed up, then that humanness is brought into the performance, and in a way it's interactive.
Right, yeah.
Because they could kind of be with you through those lows.
Right.
And you could go like,
Well, I think so much of us are used to interacting with electronic music just like headphones on or just like whatever, and like you hear like a constructed thing that like someone like you were talking about like with like doing in GarageBand, where it's like you're like collaging a song together like as you go, and like that is the art. Whereas like, you know, this is all the ephemeral moment, and it's like a whole totally different thing. And I hear you saying that you like different pieces of equipment for that, and like, you know, it's a different process, different thought, and you know, different result. And super fun. Like it's nice, and I think a lot of people who make electronic music do both things, you know.
Yeah.
And because like sometimes it sucks to get stuck in the studio, and sometimes it sucks to never get into the studio and only just like noodle, you know, like.
You really have to just keep the creative juices flowing. I mean, even if you have to get into painting for a little bit because music is just getting boring. I think that I've recently been getting more into video art and mixing that with music in ways, because like playing music so much, you like really get into the same habits or like same harmonic ideas and same like rhythmic grooves. So if I'm messing with video, then the video itself could be a source of inspiration, trying to match the vibe of what that is.
Yeah.
So there's or collaborating with other people has obviously been like a really cool thing to do to really think outside of what we normally do as well.
Absolutely.
But going back to this little idea soundbite thing, I also have some pre-built drum machines that I have, or drum rhythms, and I could have this little melody going and cycle through different drum beats to just see if they work.
In like a synchronized way. It's all
in a synchronized, like it'll all work, and then it'll almost sound like it's planned.
Oh, but the snare's shifted, right?
The snare is shifted, you're right. So I could probably, I'm not gonna even take I will just have to shift the snare. But it'll be kind of wonky and cool.
Yeah.
Wait, it just has to be on that. And that works, just by shifting that snare. It's kind of cool. It's like a Jersey Club beat. And to make this actually a song, maybe I could throw a different chord progression than I did before. So I'll go back to the same sound. I'll start still with it in D major and do something a bit different. Let's see. And I don't really love the way that sounds. I think it's because there's two melodies happening at once on that, so I'm just gonna start from scratch. And you kind of have to accept your losses sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Like the thing's not super good.
In a live performance, like that will totally happen, and people are generally pretty understanding of that.
Totally.
So now I'll do more, like the last one was a vamp between these two chords. Now I could do more of a 4-chord progression, and maybe something that's a little bit longer, because like those were just 2 measures. I could do a little bit longer chord progression. Here's something. Turn down, maybe bring it an octave higher. And there's already some melodic ideas that I'm doing with my right hand, and I have to constantly think about making things simpler.
Right, like save it for the other loop or whatever.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah, save it for the other channel. So, and that goes with recording and layering just too many things at once.
That's my number one problem with.
So instead of doing all of that, I could just have it on the one beat.
Totally.
So, and I'm gonna change the snare back.
Yeah,
to being
yeah, you don't have that there anymore.
Actually, that's kind of nice. There's a little shuffle to that. And
yeah.
Little happy accidents.
A little garage shuffle.
Yeah. And I'm gonna even make it simpler. I think a really easy thing to do with any form of art is to just keep adding stuff until it sounds good. Mm-hmm. And again, subtract. Like keep subtracting. You have an idea, especially in the studio, just keep on taking away stuff until it makes sense. Because to us, because we've heard the loop so many times, it's like, oh yeah, 15 layers sound great all together in different time signatures and like slightly different keys.
Because we've heard each individually,
So
we know
many
what they're
times.
like and we can pick them out, but as a mass.
But if you're gonna hear something for the first time and for it to make sense immediately, or maybe you want to make something that takes the listener a minute to really understand. It's really up to you.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this, I'm just gonna make it even simpler.
Love it.
So. So I like that. I'm gonna turn down the filter to leave a little bit more room for melodic things. If it was a faster tempo, this would almost be like a hyper pop melody. But this is slow. Like you could have like a cool R&B sample over this or something.
Totally,
I think.
yeah.
There's an energy to it. It's not like there is some dissonance to it, but it resolves, and you could kind of just hear ideas floating in your head.
Yeah. Yeah,
the
chords
are different ways.
Totally. The chords are extended and colorful, but they're like pretty fundamental, and like you can play some pentatonic melodies over it and it'll work. And,
I think that's the thing. Like they're just dissonant enough to where if you do some pentatonic stuff, it will still be nice.
But you'll get some interesting characters.
It's kind of what you want to hear, actually.
Yeah.
So with this one, I'll probably the bass line. I'm not even gonna really do a rhythmic bass line. I'm just gonna lay notes and just like whole note bass line, just to like bring body to it, because the chords themselves are rhythmic. I don't need to have too many adjacent rhythmic things happening. The drums are pretty syncopated, the chords are syncopated. So I'm probably gonna turn that up a little bit. So it just goes to F sharp.
Oh yeah.
You might have some passing tones in there. It kind of brings more to the chords.
Yeah, I like that bass line. There's an interesting color on that last chord that wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that again.
Yeah. I wasn't like hearing that as like a 4 chord or whatever, but like there it is, like, and like that's super cool.
Yeah.
Like it's like a really colorful version. I don't know what key you're in, but like wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I think I'm still actually. You could think about this key in a few different ways. You could almost be in B minor, but I would say it's A major.
Okay, yeah.
With accentuating the B minor side of it, especially in the last 2 chords.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. It's like looking at harmony as being fluid, and no need to really feel grounded in any
Particular chord.
Or rules. If it sounds cool, it's cool.
It's a mentality that like, in my mind, comes from jazz a bit, where like, you know, like just like the notes are the notes, and if it sounds good with those notes, then it is good. But I also hear it a ton in like cool like EDM production and stuff, where like people like take a chord progression and change the chord, like what it sounds like by just switching the bass note under it. You know, it's like such a cheap trick that like squeeze all kinds of mileage out of stuff.
I'm like such a nerd for like mid 2000s progressive house. Like early Cascade and like Deadmau5 and stuff, like their first albums, because like
I gotta go back and listen to
there's
that
a lot of emotion in it, and I could actually play one of the chord progressions because I was been playing that. I played it live, and I never do covers, but the song 4 AM by Cascade I really love, and it's like the actually fairly similar chord progression as what I was doing. I think that this one's in B minor, and if I remember it right, I think it's. But it's longer, so it's,
that's cool. Yeah, that's very, very much in that vein that I'm talking about. Yeah.
And then it's same chord, but it's going from that B to the D, changing the modality of it, and then same chord going down, and then it makes it a G7.
Yes. And that kind of like the bass line creates a reharmonization of the thing. And
exactly.
Like,
so I could
cool.
just be playing this B minor chord, which is the fundamental harmony, and then by playing the bass notes,
that's so powerful. It's cool.
Yeah, the
and
only different chord is when you're chromatically going down, and that's really just an accentuation of the restarting of the chord progression.
Just to give it some tension to resolve, so
but
it's back to the top. Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
Oh, it's super cool.
And in the original song that's taken from, there's a lot of syncopation in the actual chords in the melody.
Is it one of those just like massive like future chord kind of kind of thing?
It's just like, yeah, it is just like that. It's just giant building. And it's really beautiful. There's an ethereal voice over the top. It's just one of my favorite songs ever.
I'm gonna listen to that one when we're done. Put that on.
Well, I'll go back to that other idea, which is like in some ways very similar to that. And I accidentally deleted it, which is no problem. Make it more percussive. So that already has a different feel than the last time I played it.
The cool melodic thing on the second chord.
Yeah.
Like neat little like.
I might even throw a different drum beat. Play with some of those other ideas. Maybe take off some of those layers. Make it kind of simple. I might actually turn down the chords.
Man, that's so sweet that you can mix it over there.
Yeah, it has channel mixers per loop, which is really great.
A clutch feature for this kind of thing.
No, I'll go back. I'll play a similar bass line that I had. It's kind of.
I guess
turn down. Whoops. What channels? Oh yeah, it's
running straight through the looper, huh?
I'll turn down the loop again.
So many gain stages going on over here.
It's like it doesn't matter like how advanced your setup is. You're always gonna have gain staging issues.
It's true.
All right. That should.
Or how simple it is. You'll still have them too. Like, I don't know.
I know, right?
Somehow.
Right. Kind of similar idea. I'm gonna bring that. And I'm layering the octaves just to like make it bigger sounding. There's already 2 oscillators per note, which is nice.
Can you detune them relative to each other?
Yeah, you can. And I think this one actually might not even be 2 oscillators. This is just a single oscillator patch. But because I'm playing it in octaves, it is virtually having 2 oscillators.
Totally, yeah. One of the benefits of the no mono thing is that
exactly,
you get to,
yeah.
Make your own stacks.
So, and I'm bringing the chords back. And I could take out these hi-hats so you could hear the chords a little bit better. And now we can think about a melodic idea. We've been using a lot of my sounds, which are nice, but for the lack of a better, I like to bring cheesier sounds into stuff sometimes. And a lot of the presets that are already in the synth, especially for lead voices, are amazing. Cool. And one sound that I really like is this whistle sound, and I gotta remember. I think it's called song whistle. Just a great little sound. And I want to go up to the highest octave.
Reminds me of the Animal Crossing type beat I made in here.
Yeah. I mean, I think, oh no.
It's all good.
I think Animal Crossing is a point of reference for most people making music. I don't play the game, but my partner plays. So
I don't play either, but
during the pandemic, like there's no one that wasn't affected in some way by the soundtrack of Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
I'm especially influenced by their the sound of their voices. When like they're just like those weird little robot sounds.
We had fun like recreating that effect in Ableton, like sampling my voice and like chopping it up into like weird syllables and stuff. It was fun. Random, like said a bunch of syllables and then had it randomized per note, so you get the pitch from the note, and then it would spit out a random syllable. So like,
I've been experimenting with similar things with my voice and using formatting to like not necessarily get the rhythmic nature of Animal Crossings, but to get the tonal characteristics
right,
I really like, because I still want to hear the words,
Yeah.
but I like the tone of their weird little cute voices.
Yeah,
So
it's
by
all format
messing
shifting,
with
right?
format, like you could really, and just boosting that a little bit, I mean, it sounds more robotic, but has more life to it.
Absolutely.
And just far enough from me where I don't have to feel as insecure. Where it's like, it's sometimes nice to, I release a lot of stuff with my voice that's pure and raw without any effects or any tuning or anything.
Sure.
But I like that when it's acoustic instruments. When it's synthetic instruments, it's fun to kind of make yourself sound as different as possible.
I like to become another instrument.
And both, like sometimes you could do that with acoustic instruments. Like there's no limit to that.
Brilliant.
Going back to this beat as I get easily sidetracked.
All good.
You're gonna hear this. I'm gonna turn down the other parts so you could hear that cute little whistle sound a little bit better.
Nice.
Turn down the drums maybe.
So good. Has like a general MIDI kind of a vibe about it too, like a sound font kind of energy.
And I'm not playing any of the fundamental notes of the chords. I'm kind of bouncing around like thirds, fifths, sixes. Because the sound is so playful and fun, you could get away with more dissonance with it.
Totally.
And if you have a really weird, crunchy, harsh sound that's like lower on the range of the keyboard too, I feel like higher octave sounds too, you can get away with a little bit more dissonance.
Right.
Even you have to play safer, I think, with your melodies. But with this weird little whistle sound, I feel like you could get away with murder. Like you really can.
First off, because it's cute and sounds great, but also because it's so like it's such a simple wave that like it's not gonna like take all that space up from any other part. You know, it'll sit, just happily sit on top of anything.
I'm gonna do like a little like fluttering melody idea off just like the 2 and 3. And I like that as a basic idea. It's not like a melody that really feels like a lead melody. It's kind of more of a driving part of the rest of the things.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of rhythmic.
Kind of reminds me of like a lot of pop melodies.
And that like this isn't dissonant in any way, but for some reason it puts a smile on my face. And I'm gonna bring up the other parts.
Yeah.
Bring down the melody a little bit more. And add some more drum parts. And by starting with all of those layers, then you could, if I was in the studio or something, it was like, oh, how would I want to craft this song with just loops?
Yeah.
Like, this is just my first idea. I would take out the kick drum and just have these parts, and then take out the bass. I have an 808 kind of coming in. I think it's coming on channel 4. So let's just give me some rhythm. Actually, I'm gonna start with the melody, which is something I don't do that much.
kind of like interesting like galloping thing.
I'm gonna reset the loop. So I'm just gonna start off the song like this, and I already have loops in, but that doesn't mean if I'm playing live or something that I can't play over the top and just kind of milk what I already have.
Before you get too far into it, I'm gonna give you that 5-minute warning. We're going off the air on the TV, but we can continue on the YouTube, so however long you want. So.
Cool, sounds good. So I'd still start off with A major and maybe make it a little bit longer. I'm still on the whistle sound, which is actually I kind of like, and I'll bring it low.
Oh, the decay at the end.
Yeah, those are pretty weird.
Super cool. Whoa.
So I could just start it off like that. I messed up the timing there, but I'll bring it back. And again, it's like some of those imperfections are endearing, I guess.
Yeah.
I probably, if I was to have recorded that song, I would have shifted those early chords out a little bit more. But it gives me an idea if there was another place the song could go in the studio, I probably would go there. I kind of like the way like these like 4 slightly more dissonant chords sound, and then for another part to just be like the 1 and 4.
Yeah. So this actually touches on something that like I see that like people that I'm trying to work with on songwriting composition like struggle. It's like figuring out how to write a B part, some kind of second part to their thing, you know, because like it's like especially when you're working with loops, it's really easy to get stuck with loops.
That's the biggest issue with loops. 100% is how to get out of it. Like I'll try to hurry up actually because the coolest thing about this loop pedal is it has a setting where you could create parts simultaneously and not have to think about loops. So I'll try to show that really quickly. Cool. So I had that idea where it was, you know, a 1 and a 4, and the other part, which is like a 1 6 5 4 or something.
Cool.
So I'll start with the 1 or the 4 to 1. So that's one part, and then I'll do the other part. So they're both starting off of D. They don't have to. I could do something a little bit weirder. But now I have 2 sections, that 4-note descending thing, and then now it's going back to just those 2 chords.
Cool.
So I could cycle between them, and then what I could make this more interesting is have a different melody for each part, and then I don't get stuck in that loop forever.
Yeah. So I like the idea that it's like the second part is like you just took the 2 chords and added 2 more.
Yeah.
Super simple.
Really,
like
really simple.
Easy formula to plug in.
Exactly. And I mean, you can change and modulate slightly too. I could have, I'll make another chord or another part. Actually, I think I might have lost. There we go. That's this other sound. Now I'll have a third part that is modulating up 3 steps. And a little bit more dissonant, back to the, and then it'll go back to the first 1 and 4. And then I'll bring the whistle sound in.
Never fails. I see why you like it so much.
Back to the first chord progression. The second one now. And then this is kind of like a bridge. Maybe like kind of emotional. Bringing the most of the whistle. And then back to the original. B part.
Yeah, I love that.
C part. And I could change the beat with the other part and just constantly and endlessly kind of change it. And I can loop the melodies too with the parts, but I do like to have some hands-on control. I don't need to bake everything into the loop.
Yeah.
And I think that when I'm using this function, I mainly use
just
the chords.
Yeah.
I actually have bass pedals that I use with my left foot.
You like a Taurus pedals or something?
I use I don't know. There's Studio Logic, I think, makes
cool.
mine, and I hook it to my Slim Fatty.
Cool. Yeah.
And I have like arpeggios being synced or just quarter notes, so it could have.
So like no matter when you hit it,
and then it's rhythmic, but it's
time.
still. It doesn't get old. It's not like a sequence of some sort.
And it's not just a drone either.
Yeah, and like I feel like if there's just quarter notes happening, it's just enough to drive the song.
For the kind of stuff you're playing
it
right
works.
now, especially.
It works
like,
really
for
well.
Sure.
And that way I could have loops of chords and then have that while also being able to hear slight variation in the melody over time.
Totally. Super cool.
But I mean, that's just a really brief overview of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's rad,
A
man.
fun way to look at live music, recording, whatever, even just having fun. I spend, I would say, at least an hour every day just playing around with different setups and just practicing and improvising. And it's like anything, really, it's hard to even know if it's improvising at a certain point because
Right. So you have a vocabulary.
sometimes, yeah, you really are referencing a vocabulary and a set of techniques
Right.
and melodic ideas and an entire archive of recorded music that you don't even
Sure.
know. Or
Right.
sometimes you're borrowing from other people.
Of course.
No one owns chord progressions or melodies, really.
Totally.
I mean, I guess to a certain extent, yes, but it really is within all of us. And
Totally.
by doing it every day, it becomes even more part of you, and it's super fun. So if anybody has a will, then you got a way to do that. So
Yeah.
I mean, and you could be in a DAW or anything, just a MIDI keyboard. You really don't need anything. My favorite and most inspiring instruments are the small Casio keyboards because they just have a really fun, charismatic, cute sound. That
Totally,
works
yeah,
in
like-
a lot of my music.
Just fits in that sort of
It fits perfectly.
cozy world that you create.
Yeah, and they're really nostalgic, and I'm a sucker for nostalgia. So they they fit in a place, and they're really unique too. And I feel like there's usable sounds on really any keyboard. If you ever see anything for free or someone's giving away something, I've never met a keyboard I don't like. Some may be more useful, like this one's especially useful because it could do absolutely everything. But sometimes those like really cheap, cool free ones that you see, or like really, really cheap ones that are basically just being given away, could make your music more interesting.
I'm pretty partial to using those just like cheap preset, not like toy, but those like learning keyboards that people have.
Yeah.
Like, they'll have like 250 random sounds and you just like plug that into like some pedals and like you're off into this like bizarro world of like just familiar sounds because everyone's heard those like simple general MIDI sounds, but then like you warp them and do something funny to them.
Yeah, you throw a mod pedal in the mix or a reverb or something.
Totally.
And it's definitely game over.
My thing that I've learned is I need a delay pedal for everything that doesn't have one built in because
I
I like
know.
get so like I just want to start turning that knob, like the delay time.
There
knob
is something really satisfying. Like you
It's
could,
so
you could
simple and
pretty
fun.
much just write a whole song on that. Maybe even an entire album.
And it's a really like something that I've been doing with my delay pedal. My hardware jamming is like I've been learning to play drum kit better. You know, me and Alex both got kits during the pandemic.
That's fun.
Separately,
drum wars.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't faced off yet, but but you know, so I have like a little like Micro Freak which has a sequencer in it, which is cool, and then run that through a delay pedal. And so like sometimes I want to get these, you know, it's only a 16-step sequencer, and sometimes I want to get like more rhythm in there.
Yeah.
So you can sequence like short eighth notes and then use the delay pedal to fake some 16th note syncopation or something like that, and like get a little more fun out of it, you know. So I'm all about like
I love playing
delay.
keyboard through like maybe my favorite keyboard album of all time is Shri Camel by Terry Riley, if you've heard of it. And he uses a set of tape loops, and it's just he's using an old combo organ through 2 reel-to-reel tape loops. And
like a real-time overdubbing
and one of them's a long tape loop and the other one's a short one for creating rhythmic stuff.
Oh, cool. But he's feeding both in real time?
Yeah, I believe so.
Neat.
And it's amazing how full it is with just 2 manuals. He's also a very amazing keyboard player, but he does a lot of really cool rhythmic stuff. And when you're playing with a delay, it is like a short loop or something that's playing back to you immediately, and you could play delay pedals like loop pedals. And a lot of loop pedals or delay pedals have loop functions.
Totally.
And it's fun to like kind of call and response to yourself. Especially if you do like a 6-second delay.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's really fun.
And it goes into the full ambient territory at that point.
I mean, because we have that other, the other feed is probably done.
The other feed is done. So now
we're another
MARZ
cool
After
thing,
Dark now.
And let's just say this is a little bit more, let's do something more experimental. I don't know why, but I love the sound of older drum machines like the CR78, and these are all CR78 sounds. And I'll try to make it actually like a little crunchier. That sounds kind of cool. And then I'm gonna get like a really basic sound. And I'm gonna turn up the decay. I gotta remember how to do this exactly.
So many features on that thing.
Yeah, I think I got this though. So what I'm trying to set up is like a faux delay where I'm slowly playing on stuff and then it's fading as I put new.
Oh, so you can like decay out the loop.
I think it will. Actually, that didn't work.
Sounds like it's fading.
There we go. I'm gonna turn down the fade time.
Man, that's
slightly.
something I never play around with this. This is cool. I never do this.
This sounds really cool when you put a reverb at the end. I'm gonna have a little release on it. And the loop pedal is another band member or something, kind of just responding to me. It's as simple as a long delay.
But it's like, oh man, it's a cool trick though.
And if you don't stop playing, it really just sounds like an ever evolving song.
Totally.
And I can make the delay time as long as I want. Like 4 minutes if I wanted to. But
No
I'll
way.
do one more example where it's a slightly longer delay.
Cool. I love how the feedback like pulls those overtones out of the sounds.
And what sounds cool too is if I'm doing this purely with pads and not percussive at all. I'm gonna bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to turn off the stack because that's kind of nice. So as soon as I turn off the stacking feature on it, which is like the overdubbing, the sound on sound, then it just locks in. It doesn't decay anymore, which is pretty sweet.
That's super cool. So you can like freeze the moment when you got to.
When you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of a nice little section, and
that's really handy.
In a way, it's like having a portable tape deck or something.
Yeah, totally. But like with the ability to splice it into a loop real quick.
Exactly, and sync it perfectly to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the other thing that's making this make a lot of sense. Is like that whole long delay thing is really tricky to turn into something if you don't have a clock that you can hear. And so that's
I think having a loop pedal of any kind or using a DAW like a loop pedal really changes the way you think about writing because it's so direct, and the biggest challenge is finding ways out of that loop.
Right.
But for building just instant ideas, and then you also have to play on your keyboard or instrument or wherever you write songs on, guitar, and see what chord progressions work.
Right.
And then think about loops. Like there's so many different approaches to songwriting, but using loops is a really, really fun one because anyone could do it. Totally. And some of my favorite recordings of friends have been from people, quote unquote, that consider themselves non-musicians, and they have the DL4 and make loops on that.
Yep.
And it just doesn't make sense, kind of, some of the melodies they come up with, but it sounds so cool and weird and new and fresh.
Totally, yeah.
And so you could give a loop pedal to anyone and they'd have fun.
For sure. You know, like I went to music school and blah, 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 but it's like I'm totally not, I'm a firm believer that like you don't have to be, it's like not about education, it's just about creativity. And like, I really do think that like the people who maybe know less are accessing something more direct sometimes, you know?
Definitely.
Like, I don't know. I don't want to discourage anyone from learning more about music if you want to learn more about it, but like, you know, there's like this kind of like naivete that when you like understand things better that is lost, and like you sometimes don't arrive at these sort of quirky, unusual places that you might stumble across.
A lot of those like you know, music theory concepts and writing counterpoint and following rules on what harmony should be can definitely hinder. There is a balance though, and I feel like it's nice to know like basic terminology.
It helps to be able to at least talk about it. But sometimes.
But even so, it's like some of the most like interesting songs are not necessarily interesting, but it's like some of the hardest hitting dance songs ever made are just like one chord shape mapped around chromatically. Yeah,
like sampled to a sampler and then just played one note at a time, and like as a rhythm instead.
And then there's a melody that's in a different key.
Yep.
And it's like, that shouldn't ever work, and I don't think I could ever do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just like my ear would tell me it was wrong when I did it, and so I'd be like, oh, I don't do that.
Like, how do you develop that sense where like it's beyond music, and now you're working with sound?
But I think this is like you're getting there with this kind of idea where it's like you just like listen to it repeat. You're not seeing a visual of it. You don't have your hands on the keys. It's just you're just hearing it and thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's just simple. Like you don't have to have multiple. I think the more distractions you have, the harder it is. Just a drum machine, any keyboard, any instrument. It could be a guitar. It could be a saxophone. It really doesn't matter.
Totally.
But like a drum machine is really nice for keeping in time with a looper or whatever you're using, and the instrument of choice. But yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you all for having me.
Yeah,
maybe I think I learned something about myself.
I always feel that way on these too. You know, like I'm trying to
Yeah.
explain something that I think I know about. And I'm like, do I actually know about this? Or I'll learn, you know, I'll find something new as soon as I'm like poking around. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the thing about like sitting at your gear and
Like
learning.
I literally do this every day, hour every day, and I still mess up constantly, and that's just part of life.
Yeah.
And
It's
sometimes
part of the fun.
the
It's what makes it
coolest
exciting.
parts of a song too, like we were saying before, embracing those happy accidents.
100%. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Hudson, for coming
Yeah.
on the stream. It's really awesome to have you, and such a nice breath of fresh air to not hear my own voice for like an hour and a half straight exclusively. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing the setup and everything.
Of course, it's amazing how fast time flies.
I know, right? Here we
Yeah.
are. Here we are.
I don't know if I've been looking at any cameras, but
There's an unusual number of them out today too, so it's like I feel like I kind of like where's
but it was definitely.
all right, now he's messing with us in there. Well, geez. Okay, well, I suppose we might as well wrap it up. Supposed to say thanks to our numerous sponsors on the stream. We appreciate you very much. And thanks to Jay in the control room and Lucius over here behind the camera, making it so you can see and hear us. And thanks again, Hudson, for being here. Yeah. You have anything coming up or anything like that you want people to know about?
I made a really long movie called Crystal Oscillators. It's 25 minutes long, and you can see it on YouTube. It's Eternal Family's channel, and it's like the most ambitious thing I've ever done. And I recorded about 5 hours of cinematic soundtrack music for it. And the cassette for that is on Orb Tapes, and another cassette will come out for the second half on Hotham Sound in a few months.
Cool.
And I'm like just so pumped about that. And then I'm making a bunch of like, that's like my really moody, dramatic like self. And then some friends and I have been making just like really just trashy dance songs under almost good dance tapes, and that's all on Spotify.
Oh, cool.
And
I haven't heard any of
I have
that.
some like cool like trashy house songs that I'm making. It's like kind of reinvigorating that like playful spirit.
Super fun.
I've been in like a really like deeper, methodic, like older like synth 70s world for the last 3 years. So it's really nice to kind of come back and resurface into like simpler. Whereas like some of this kind of inspiration is coming
Right.
from, you know.
Some bright, sunny, like dance.
Just
tunes.
pure, just classic dance.
Awesome.
And it's also a struggle. It's really hard making pop music too. But it's more refreshing when you haven't made it in a long time.
Yeah.
Because
it
again,
fresh.
it's like keeping it fresh, and like sometimes your first ideas are the best, especially when you've taken a break for a long time. You just have to trust your instincts and not overthink it. But yeah, Crystal Oscillators for some of that moody stuff, and Almost Good dance tapes, and Hudson Glover for both of those.
Sweet.
But,
Check it out, y'all.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again. We'll catch y'all next week doing something over here. Until next time.